Okay, hello and welcome, Swarthmore students. We're going to do a recap from the last Thursday's class where I'm going to show you how to kind of go through step by step and create a map. This is kind of the goal. We want to be able to make our own color scheme of a shapefile on top of kind of a web tiled base map, the OpenStreetMap in this case. I'm going to show you a couple other options there, and then a title. And as the weeks go on, I'm going to show you more and more about how to kind of frame this up and make, maybe a legend or scale bar, that kind of thing. But for now, what we're looking at is just like, can we get data on a page? Can we symbolize it and then put it, export it as a JPEG? So this is the goal for today. This is what I made during class. But I deleted my project file, so I have to start from scratch. If you're trying to find your redlining district data, I hope you can remember to go Google search. It's called mapping inequality. And if you just Google mapping inequality Richmond, you should be able to find it. It's University of Richmond that puts out this data set, historical data set. And what you want to do is once you get this, you want to go and find the downloads and data, right? You can zoom into the cities to see them, but you really want to download the shapefile for your particular city. So that's what you want to do there. So once you've downloaded your data, you can unzip it and you should get, as you remember, a shapefile, which is really a bundle of different files, but they all kind of work together. And now I'm going to open up QGIS because that's the program we're working in. I hope you remember, I deleted my project file, but as you go, you'll want to save your project file because that's kind of how the computer remembers how you're organizing all this data together. So what colors you choose, what your layouts look like, that's the job of the project file. So before I even start, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just throw in a base map. And if you've followed along from last time, you should already have under web your quick map services plugin, which will allow you to throw on. We're going to just start with the OpenStreetMap base map, the OSM standard. And that's just a nice way so you can see the world. You can kind of see in your map canvas where we're working. And I'm going to zoom into kind of North America using my mouse wheel. And then I've got the hand, and that's kind of to help pan around. And so once you get your base map in there, you know what? I'm going to save my project right away just so I can start the habit. And if I say save, and then I go back to my desktop, module 3, and I call this Chicago. Let's call it Chicago redlining. I'm gonna hit save, and now as soon as I hit save, this project folder comes up in my browser, and that will help me navigate right to that folder, and I can kind of start to see right away the project folder I'm working out of. And on the desktop, if I was to close out of this now, and I say, oh no, I've done all this work. Okay, well good, I've got a file now. I can go back and see my map work. So. Oops, I called it relining. I'll have to rename that redlining. I'll do that in a second though. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is bring in my data, my CartoDB query. So this is the redlining districts from Chicago. And if I click and drag that in, you'll see a little, kind of something pops up down here. And I can zoom in different ways. I can use my mouse wheel. If I have a touch screen, I can use it just like a smartphone. Or if you want to use your mouse and kind of click around, you can go up to here and get your zoom in, zoom out, that kind of stuff. So I'll grab my zoom in tool and I'm going to draw a little box around there, kind of old school. And that's going to help me zoom in and see what I'm talking about here. And so now I can kind of see my districts, and these are the Hulk districts. And I'm going to go back to my pan map tool just so I can click around a little bit more. So the first thing to know when we're looking at this is we're looking at a shapefile, and a shapefile is really it's kind of like an Excel file that has what are called geographies, and the geographies mean that every row in that Excel file has a shape, and that shape has either one or multiple geometries associated with it. And the geometries are, if I was to grab my selection tool, are these things, these districts. And so each of these is kind of like a unique record in that Excel file. And in a shapefile, we don't call it an Excel file. It's called an attribute table. And the shapefile format uses something called a DBF. You don't need to worry about that. But it's the way it stores all that that attribute information. And so if I want to look at the quote unquote Excel file or the spreadsheet that goes along with these geographies, I can right click my layer, or if you're on a Mac, it's either Option or Control click, and then you can say Open Attribute Table. In this attribute table, if we look at it, we see, okay, there's 3 fields and there are many, many records going down like this. And I could scroll down and I can see, okay, there's 580 records in this attribute table. Well, each one of those records directly relates to one of the shapes I'm seeing on the ground here, hence the word shapefile. So the shapefile is giving shape to these attributes. So that's cool, but what if I want to actually symbolize it? Like, it's very interesting that I can see this and compare it, and I could measure area or do things like that. But from a visual standpoint, it's not that interesting right now because everything's the same color. And that's a default. Whenever you bring in a shapefile to Q, it all kind of comes in as a default color. So I could do what's called a nominal or a categorical. It's a categorization of this data by something. And what we're really doing, because these have an order to them, A, B, C, D, we want to give what's called an ordinal color scheme so that each one of those letters corresponds to a value. And in this case, that value is quite detestable, but it's what the kind of historical legacy here is. A was places that were considered a good place to lend money, and down to D as a bad place based on race. So if we want to do that, how do we categorize these to come up with a different visualization pattern? What we have to do, we close our attribute table, is we go to the other part of the layers that is the most important for new people to GIS. So we had the attribute table, that's one of the most important things, and then properties, and that's the other most important thing. So attributes is kind of like, what's the information? And then properties are like, what do I want to do with that information? So I go to properties, and there's lots of options in properties, but the only options we care about as we learn to make maps is called symbology. And symbology is just kind of a little bit of a fancy word, or a unnecessarily fancy word for just how do you want to paint, what colors do you want to use, and or what shapes and that kind of thing. But if I want to change their symbology, I click on, it might be on something else, I click symbology, and then you'll see that the default is a single symbol, which means that every single record in geography is being symbolized the same way. In this case, it was a default with a pink fill, and then the stroke, which is the border, is getting a thin black line. But I want to change that. So based on what we've talked about, we have letters A, B, C, D, and they represent an order. So we want to do a categorical color scheme, or a nominal or ordinal color scheme. So we're going to go categorized, and Q says, okay, you're going to categorize it, great, but I don't know what you want to do yet because you haven't told me. And so we're going to tell the program, okay, value, let's pick the value. And I hope you can remember from looking at the attribute table that there were only 3 fields, and those 3 fields are showing up right here. The Hulk ID was a unique ID for every single district, so that wouldn't really be helpful. If we clicked that and hit classify, okay, we have a color for every single district, right? And if I hit apply, you'll see, oh, interesting. Okay, it categorizes every single shape as a different color because I've just told it to categorize it by ID. But we don't really want to do that. We want to categorize it by grade. And if I say that and hit classify, and it's asking me, are you sure you want to throw out all the things I just made? I say yes. And now it has A, B, C, D, and I hit apply. And then I can kind of start to see, maybe there's some patterns that I'm interested in that I can see. The colors for this categorical color scheme are default. They're not super helpful. Perhaps I want the viewer of my map to have a bit more of an impression about what these things mean. So to change the colors of these, I'm going to go and just kind of go blue, or maybe a green, yellow, orange, red, or something really obvious like that. Maybe blue, green, yellow, red. So I can double click this, and up comes another window. A lot of GIS is just kind of going through windows, and then I'm going to just pick a blue. And some of this stuff, I could tell you every single button, but the better way to do it is to just go and experiment, and you'll learn a lot faster that way. So I'm going to go, let's go with a, yeah, let's go with a green, I guess. I don't know. I don't say okay. And go here. We'll go to yellow. Like that, maybe a yellowish orange. Okay. And then for this one, we'll go to kind of a fire orange or a red. Okay. And if I hit apply now my map is starting to take shape a little bit more. And I kind of start to see what's going on. So that's really interesting. The other decision I might make is I might say, well, you know, those borders are a little distracting. Maybe I want those to soften up a bit. I think in Emily's, she decides to create color for the border and then make the polygon hollow so you can see beneath it. For our case, I'm going to just decide to turn all of the borders off. That's just kind of the map I want to make today. Don't ask me why. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting all of them, and I'm going to go change the symbol for all of them. I'm going to this simple fill, and I'm going to shut off and say don't have a border. And I just kind of know where all the buttons are, but it's stuff you're going to have to explore and figure out. So when I said no pen, it took away the border. I hit apply, and watch what happens over here. Apply, poof, the border goes away. So that's kind of interesting. So I'm pretty happy with this. One thing I don't like though is I don't really like this background. This OpenStreetMap has a lot of color in it as well. And part of the job of cartography is trying to make the visual digestible to the viewer. And I feel like there's kind of too many things going on. So the great thing about this quick map service is if you want to open up search QMS, there's other options besides OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is just kind of a nice starter map. You can kind of just see what's going on. It looks a lot like Google or Bing or Apple or something like that. But it's free and it's open source, so we like that. The other thing you can try is if you type in Esri, you're going to get a lot of different options. And some of these are kind of nice space maps. I'm going to start with a light. And these are just some kind of stock base maps that they use. And it popped in, but I can't see it. And I'm hoping you can kind of start to tell that these layers aren't just what we're looking at. They're actually, it matters what order they're in as well. So the reason that Esri one's not showing is that it is underneath the OpenStreetMap. So if I want to see the Esri gray base map, I have to shut off that one. And so now I can kind of see, aha, yeah, that's kind of a nice, I think that this gray base map is kind of nice because there's not as many labels everywhere. I'm kind of seeing it's a little bit more sparse, and it's letting my data seem like the data is the point of the map now. The data kind of shows out nice and bright. So let's just say I'm done with this. This map looks good to me. I could try some of these other base maps. I could search for other base maps that I want to try to throw in there. But I'm pretty happy with this Esri Gray, the light one. So what I want to do now is create a layout. And to create a layout, I need to go to Project and New Print Layout. And so the difference between a layout and the map canvas is the map canvas kind of doesn't have a fixed scale. It lets me zoom in and zoom out and kind of look at the data, but it doesn't relate to a physical page. And the print layout is letting us use QGIS to say, no, I want to have a piece of paper. And I want that piece of paper to be, I'm going to say letter and portrait. And letter is the word for 8.5 by 11. And portrait means that you want it to stand up so that it's tall and skinny instead of wide and short. So portrait and landscape are the two orientations. So I tend to call my layouts whatever the dimension is that they're going to be, just so I remember. So I'm going to say letter portrait. Okay. And it doesn't, of course, when I create that, it doesn't make it for me. It just gives me a default piece of paper that is never in the American system. So if I want to change my layout, I can right click, or I think it's either Control or Option click in a Mac, the page properties. I go over to my size, and I'm going to pick letter. I'm going to pick portrait, and then I'm good to go. And so now if I want to add my map, the way I add my map is I go over to this side, and I pick this very nondescript icon over here that says Add Map when I hover over it. It looks like a page with a little green kind of plus sign on it. So I hit Add Map, and I could make the map any piece of this page I want to, But just because I like maps, I'm going to make it the whole page. So I'm going to go up over here, click and drag, and I make it the whole page just because I think that's cool. And now let's see how that comes in. Hey, that came in at a pretty good scale. But it's not quite centered. So if I want to move it, what I have to remember to do is not just click and drag, because that's going to move the whole map, right? The whole map on the piece of paper is moving now. And that's because I'm using my select move item tool, which is kind of the general arrow. So if I want to move the map content instead of the map itself, I have to actually go to, where is it here? Move item content. And that has the arrows inside the kind of piece of paper. If I click that, and now I can kind of move the map around inside. So I'm going to center it like that. And if I wanted to zoom in or zoom out with this content move tool, I could just use my mouse wheel and scroll in or scroll out, but it's kind of clunky. The better way to do it is to use your scale. And if you change the scale right now, we're at 473,161, which means that 1 inch is 473,161 inches on the ground. If I want to change this, I make the number bigger if I want to zoom out, and I make the number smaller if I want to move in. So it's a little confusing, but that's kind of the easiest way to remember is big numbers mean you see more, and little numbers mean you see less. So I'm going to go 500, 1, 2, 3, and if I hit enter, we're going to see it zoom out because big numbers mean that we see more. So I'm going to do that, and then it zooms out just a little bit. And let's say I like that. I don't want it to move again. My map, I want it to stay there and not get jostled around. I can go up to my items over here and lock it. I lock it, and now I can't do anything to my map, even no matter how hard I click. So how hard I click. So now I want to add a title, and as you can guess, there's dozens of things you can do in terms of you could create a title box with, a white box with a drop shadow, or you could add text, a little description or a caption. But I want to just add a very simple title. So I'm going to go over to this text, add text here, add label. I'm going to click and drag and make a little box over here. And let's just call this Chicago redlining. And it's too small. I want it to be bigger. And of course, because this is a program that's designed to do GIS and not graphic design, it's always kind of hard. You have to go to the properties to do things. You can't just interact with it easily or quickly. So if I want to make this bigger, I have to actually go to font, click the font, and I'm just going to let's make it 48. Maybe that's pretty big. And I'm going to make it prettier. I'm going to use Futura because I think that's a prettier font. I'll do Futura and say okay. Oh, and maybe it's too big now. That's not too bad. I could choose to center justify like that. Right justify, left justify, align in the middle. That's not too bad. Just like that. Cool. So I've made a map. I feel decently okay about it. If you wanted to, you could also use that label to label make a gray italic label. Maybe for the lake would look nice. You could label different parts of the city. You could kind of custom label them like that. You could even draw different lines or districts if you kind of knew what you were talking about. But in general, let's just have this be our map and we're done. So the next thing I got to do is I got to just hit export. And you can either export as an image, which would be a JPEG like I did in class, or as a PDF. And let's try a PDF because those are easy to combine with like a Word document or something if you're going to do that. So I say export as PDF, get a warning, just say okay, close. And then on my desktop in my module 3 folder, I'm going to say redlining map version 2. This is my second draft. So I say save. And it's giving me lots of things I could do. I'm just going to see what the default does. I'll hit save. Let's just go see what that did. So I didn't make any special settings. I just kind of let it do it. And now I go here. I'm going to open up. And here's my nice PDF. Very cool. So then I could combine that, or I could place that into a Word doc or a Google Slides or whatever. And you could also do the JPEG. Oftentimes we work with JPEGs because some of these other file formats can auto, sometimes they auto format things and it gets messed up. So a JPEG is always safe. You want to do 300 DPI at a minimum, but yeah, that should work, and I hope that's at least somewhat straightforward. We'll be learning more and more and more about how to do thematic symbology as time goes on, but for now, you've just made your first map, so I hope that was fun. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.